Good morning. Sitting here on the porch, and I want to share a few thoughts today. I spent a lot of time yesterday listening to the funeral of Charlie Kirk because I wanted to be able to speak objectively, clearly, based on what I heard, not what other people had said about it. And I found it very moving. There was a lot of very emotional and very wise things said. I found it very encouraging for his family, for so many people. Found great encouragement and strength through that. And I realized listening to it that had that happened 40 years ago, there's a good chance I would have been there. I could have been Charlie Kirk. Right now everybody is saying I am Charlie Kirk. I could have been. I could have been there. I could have been swept up in that emotion. I could have been shouting in outrage about his murder. And I am outraged about his murder, but shouting about outrage about losing his message and the importance of his message. Because while I'm outraged about his murder, his message I find very troubling. And I want to say why. Like I said, I could have been Charlie Kirk. I was raised in that kind of a family. I was raised with that kind of beliefs. I was about 14 years old at the time of the bicentennial. That lets you know how old I am. And I did daily flag services on our farm, raising and lowering the flag and saluting it. And the church I went to was equally patriotic. And to love Jesus and to love America was all one and the same. God blessed America, and America is strong and important because of that. So what happened? I went to college, a Christian college. I wound up hearing a call to serve inner city and that God loves the whole world. And I wound up in a church in North Minneapolis. And when I began to serve there, and I began to hear my parishioners, the people that were in my church, tell me stories about what had happened with them and how the police had unfairly stopped them or how they had been unfairly followed, I couldn't accept that because it didn't fit with my story of America. I tried to believe them. I wanted to believe them. I listened. Thankfully, I didn't interrupt them, but I continued to listen. But every time I would hear a story, in the back of my mind, I would say, come on, you did something. Because this is the United States of America, and the police do not just stop you for no reason. But then it happened to me because of the people I was with. And I saw it firsthand. Then I saw up front what was going on. And the reason I'm telling you that story right now, it was so hard for me to accept that there might be something unjust about the policing in my country and the privilege that I had as a white person that I couldn't see what was going on with racism in my country, is because I worshiped and honored my country so much that to recognize a problem in my country was to recognize and admit a problem with my identity and my own faith. And that was a very hard bridge to cross, to accept that there are issues and problems that need to be addressed, that I still loved my country, I still love my country, but to recognize that it's not perfect and that racism is real and these problems are real and need to be addressed, threatened my own identity because my identity was so deeply tied in my faith in Jesus and my faith in the United States of America. So the two things I saw most troubling yesterday in the Charlie Kirk event, one was the continued message: love Jesus, seek Jesus, and fight for America. Love Jesus and fight for America. Love Jesus and defend America. Love Jesus and fight. Excuse me. That does not sound at all like the message of Jesus, who said to, as was said many times yesterday, to lay down your life for your friends, to pray for your enemies. And I was at least thankful our president admitted he couldn't do that, even though Charlie claimed that he could and did and loved his enemies. But that message did not get through. It was about fighting, not about loving. And it's not about defending America. If America is not living up to the truth and the values that we believe in, we don't have to defend it. We are the only country in the world besides Muslim theocracies where people see their personal faith tied so deeply to defending their country and their status in their country. That is Christian nationalism. Loving Jesus has nothing to do with fighting for America. America, as much as people try to say it was never founded as a Christian nation. Jesus is not mentioned in the Constitution. God is, as a creator, as a source. And we can talk about being a theocratic nation that believes in a divine being. But most of the founders of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence were not Christians, but deists that believed in a creator and believed in some system that defined the universe, but not that Jesus Christ was the only gospel or way. And that's part of the reason it was written into the Constitution, the separation of church and state to protect the freedom of those who believe and the freedom of those who do not. Our country was never a Christian nation, or we would not have been a slave trading nation. Our country was never a Christian nation. We used the Old Testament scriptures to identify ourselves as the new Israel, to justify the mass removal and extinction and genocide of native people. But that doesn't make us a Christian nation. That was the first thing I had great issue with in the Charlie Kirk funeral. All of the Christian nationalism. That to love Jesus means fight for America. It's not the same. Secondly, let me just go back and want to say one more thing about that. You need to be willing to accept the good and the bad in America. And one of the reasons we're at this crossroads is most white people like me have a really hard time accepting the history of our nation and saying, let's make America better. Not great again, let's make it better. And that means understanding and accepting the errors and mistakes we've made and moving on and growing from it. In my case, in the story I told you at the beginning, it meant I needed to accept that at times people, including police, can have racist tendencies and do false stops and treat people differently because of their skin color. And I had to accept it. The second thing I had great problem with is all the they language and we language. They got rid of Charlie. We are going to fight. They eliminated our man. We are going to fight back and take over. Excuse me. A lot of people disagreed with Charlie, but there was no they conspiracy to kill him. It was one kid who was suffering emotional stress and issues. We don't even know exactly why, but he was raised in a Utah home. He was raised in a Mormon family. He was raised to hunt and fish and love the Second Amendment and the farms and the open air. And for some reason, he found great anger and angst at Charlie's message, but there was no they. And what gives me the most fear from this funeral is creating the thought that we now, Charlie's friends and defenders, have a they enemy that we have to fight. And I really believe that's the message Trump wants to send, because he needs an enemy. He needs to divide America, because for him to be strong, he needs us to be fighting. And so we, as Americans, all of us, liberals, conservatives, we need to unite as Americans and not fall into the traps of separation and ideologies. Because in America, there is no we and there is a us, which makes the U.S. And we can unite around us. That's what I think. Have a great day.